Billy cascading as it washes me clean. The blood of many will be spilled by my hand. You will believe me when it covers the land.
I'm Alexis Darevko,
And I'm Phil DeSaro.
and this is the City of Bloods podcast.
You got it. Today we're talking about
James Whitey Bulger.
Yeah.
More, in fact, his death.
That's right. Was it 2 days ago?
Yes. So, for those of you who don't know, a little quick update. Bulger was transferred facilities on Halloween from Oklahoma and then to the United States Penitentiary in Hazleton near Brewston, West Virginia. Bulger was in a wheelchair and found dead, on October 30th. According to the New York Times, he was killed by inmates within hours of his arrival in Hazleton.
Who was the inmate that killed him? I heard had another mob boss underneath. That he actually killed another mob boss before Bulger.
Yes, so, you have that. Let me see, I have my notes here. The hitman that killed him is named, I'm probably going to mess this name up, but Thodios Freddy Geese. And another inmate who, at the time of me getting these notes, wasn't being released for some reason.
Okay.
Because he's literally referred to a couple times as second inmate.
The Freddy Geese character, though, this guy, does it say in there that he, I'd heard he killed another mob boss?
He killed one of the Bonanno.
Is it Joe Bonanno?
No, he killed Adolfo Begal Bruno, part of the Genovese family, for being a rat. So this guy and his...
He's a rat. He's the exterminator.
Yeah, he's basically the rat killer. The big thing here is that Bulger, who being transferred was 89, had just had hip surgery and was in Gen Pop. He's a rat in the mob world. He should have, and even in the article it's saying...
Smells like a setup.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the big question. Even there's attorneys, and I could read I literally could read for hours on this.
I just had a friend who had a hip surgery, so I know exactly what somebody goes through with that. And right after surgery, it's no time for general population.
No.
You can't even move. Bruce had to use a walker for a short period of time at least.
Yeah.
And then there's all sorts of ways you can't move, otherwise it'll pop the hip out.
Right. So, so that's the big thing. I mean, if you don't know, Bulger got caught in 2010 after being on the run for 16 years, was actually caught in California.
Now, was he in general population before this?
No. So he was moved from one federal facility to the other, and he was in...
he must have known it was over. He's moved from one facility to another, goes from isolation to general population in a place that just so happens to have the rat killer.
Right. So now here's who's the conspiracy, or who is the question now is was it the feds? Is it the mob? Was it the prison system? Was it all three?
Let's ask Julio, the conspiracy dog.
Right.
Julio, what do you think?
I agree.
He thinks it's the feds.
See, I thought he said the mob.
Nah, it's definitely got to be the feds. Well, the mobs, they're the same thing, really. But
right, yeah.
We know the reason why I'm saying the feds is because he embarrassed the shit out of the feds.
Conspiracies by Phil.
He was it James Connolly? What's the Connolly's name?
It's not in that's not in the articles that I have, but I can probably find it really quick.
Although Bulger, to the end, swore that he was not an informant and never copped to being that, he actually was an FBI informant.
Now, before you feel sorry, not to interrupt, you feel sorry for James Whitey Bulger, let's just go with this.
Right.
He was convicted of racketeering, 18 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit extortion, narcotics distribution, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and extortion.
Yeah. I thought he was charged in actually 21 murders, and
this says again, it's Wikipedia. It's 19.
His buddy, his henchman. I can't think of the guy's name right now. Big guy. He 21 of those murders, I think, were claimed like by him.
Special Agent Dennis Condon was the one that was his handler.
Was it? I thought it was a cop.
Oh no, John Connolly.
John Connolly, yeah. I thought that was the last name. Now if this is starting to sound familiar, folks, there's a movie from a few years ago that is really similar to these lines, and that's you know which one I'm talking about?
Black Mass?
The Departed.
Right. Well,
didn't The Departed have Jack Nicholson was kind of like this, just Whitey Bulger.
Well, Black Mass was the one that starred Johnny Depp, and he was James Whitey Bulger.
Oh, really?
That was the James Whitey Bulger movie.
Okay.
And then, The Departed was a.
I heard that was a Japanese movie first, but to me the premise of, having a mob boss.
It is said that it's based on his life. Also, I looked it up, like how many movies or characters have been created because of him.
Yeah.
There's the show, The Blacklist.
I've heard of that. I haven't watched it.
The actor.
It's James
Spader.
Yeah.
The character that James Spader plays is based on Bulger.
It is.
Yeah, because he's the FBI's most wanted man, and Bulger was at one point.
Yeah.
So it's one of those. There was a couple other ones. I don't have the list on me, but so it's like he is very much a
criminal
mastermind that has been glamorized by Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
Well,
I mean, Hollywood loves a tough guy, and
right.
I think Hollywood, to be honest with you, got sick of doing Italian mafia movies.
Yeah.
So the fact that the chance to do an Irish mafia movie was a bit refreshing, I think, for the folks in Hollywood.
And I think too was you also have to look that in Hollywood there are a lot of Irish immigrants sort of founded Hollywood, along with the Jewish people population that founded Hollywood. So it's one of those things. They're sort of making their now years later making their people proud by making the movies about them.
As long as it's not criminal movies,
But that's the thing, though.
Well, that was one of the things that pissed my grandfather off, because my grandfather, was off the boat from Sicily, and he had experience with that type of shit. And I ran into some greaseballs myself. I'm Italian. By greaseball, you slimy guineas, you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, I forget what topic we were talking about.
Well, we're just talking about the making movies not about Italians.
Oh, yeah, the Godfather thing. At the same time, we all liked that movie, but every time we ran into somebody and they're like, "Are you Italian or Sicilian?" Oh, it must be mafia. It must be mafia.
Right.
It's kind of like, it was a stereotype that got carried a little bit far.
And then I did notice, and they didn't say that the movie was about him, but it was the one with Ben Affleck where the bank robbers, and now I can't figure out I can't find it now. I had the list. Where they're like, the Southies. They'd always talk about, the Southies and this and that.
That wasn't I'm stupid me. I'm thinking about Good Will Hunting.
No. This is like only a few years ago.
Well, they'd do anything with Boston.
But they said that the guy who was like the big crime boss in that was supposed to be Bulger.
Based on Bulger.
He was based on Bulger, yeah. So it's like one of those guys who did horrendous things, but he's a hero in the eyes of these people. And then you have the guy who killed him, that is legitimately been convicted more than once, or on more than one account of murdering
for hire
many people, and he's 50 years old. 51, and
he looked pretty good, younger in the picture. They were showing looked a lot younger.
So he, let's see.
As you can see, we still need an engineer. So if anybody wants to volunteer their time in order to make this a better podcast, please reach out to us through the Cities of Blood Facebook page or Twitter page.
But yeah, so it's just one of those things where, of course, and just to go back to the Hazleton prison, they're throwing the thing that they're understaffed, they're undermanned,
and that's why he was murdered.
and that he was accidentally put in.
Accidentally.
Basically,
how do you accidentally take the highest profile prisoner you got?
So in part of, I'm just taking part of his speech. This is actually from one of Bulger's lawyers. I don't understand. his wife, the Federal Bureau of Prisons would transfer a super high publicity inmate who is a known snitch to general population for high security prison. You've got to be smarter than that. He added, if I was the warden of Hazelton, I would have never ever allowed him to be put in general population. It is just too risky. Bulger's killing is the third in 6 months at the prison.
So they moved him to a prison that already had...
Was like a...
They knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
This reminds me of the Jeffrey Dahmer thing. I mean, that had to be a setup right there, I believe.
I mean, I think Dahmer... That's a whole different subject.
Well, no, but the thing in common from what I'm making, people aren't getting it, is that Jeffrey Dahmer was killed by another inmate,
right?
And so was James Whitey Bulger here.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure about how long Dahmer was put in general population before he was murdered, but Bulger here, it seemed like it was like a matter of hours.
Yeah, no, he wasn't there very long.
Yeah, so he just showed up.
It doesn't say here, but I really want to say it was like 8 hours, maybe 8 hours. And if you have,
and he goes to the place where they have, or where the mafia's preferred hitman happens to be.
And here's the thing too: is if you ever been to a prison or you've ever been in prison, when you go there, you don't go. You still have to get processed. So he probably was processed for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Then put into Gen Pop.
You're right. Somebody like that would probably take a few hours to process. But you would think you'd be handling him differently. So he would arrive. I'm sure he didn't arrive on a bus with 20 other guys.
No, he probably showed up in a van by himself.
That's a van or a helicopter or something.
And again, I don't care what kind of killer he is or was or what he ordered. He was 89 with a bad hip.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he was a threat to anybody.
No, we're not saying that he didn't get exactly what he deserved.
Oh, no.
I guess this goes to a broader question. It's something that I've said for a long time here, is that, to be honest with you, in the United States here anyway, I think you could make a valid case, or maybe the ACLU or somebody could make a valid court case saying that the United States has no right at all to detain and hold any prisoners, period, on the grounds that they can't guarantee their safety. So here's my idea, and this I believe to be the honest truth. You can't argue with this. You are sentenced to what your sentence is. That means doing the time or whatever your sentence is. You're not sentenced to getting raped or getting murdered while you're inside these jails. Like, this guy was a piece of shit, no doubt. He murdered, 21, probably more than that, people.
Yeah, that's what they convicted him of.
Including his own girlfriend. I watched a documentary years ago where a guy who was the brother of the girlfriend that he had murdered was talking about it in the documentary. And while that was being filmed, 2 days later, they found his body on the side of the road somewhere. So this guy is a piece of dirt, and he definitely got what he deserved. But the question is, shouldn't have the United States been the one to execute him? If you're going to execute the guy, shouldn't it be, that be his sentence?
And I also think too is when we were talking about this, was it yesterday or the day before? I thought it was perfect for the show.
Yeah.
To add one, it was Bulger and his crimes in the cities of Boston, and the surrounding areas of Boston, and also the crime that happened in the prison.
Yeah.
So we basically have two subjects here.
Yeah.
And now we go from he's in federal custody to still being in federal custody, but then now dead.
Yeah.
Now, do you care? Do I care? Or does the government care that he's dead? No.
They're probably happy it's over with.
Well, yeah, and again, he's 89 with a bad hip.
Yeah.
The taking care of him in a federal prison now
expensive.
Probably is now another $50,000 a year.
More than that for an old guy in isolation.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I think we can call that a.
Yeah, basically the taxpayers just got out of paying a hefty bill.
Right.
So, I guess that's an upside, but. Again,
here's I think here's the other thing too is now that I'm forgetting the name now, the gentleman who killed him, the
rat killer,
we're just calling him the rat killer. If he now ends up
on death row,
or just somehow maybe hangs himself,
you know, that's the thing of he's not a
Freddy.
rat. He's not a rat. So
Right.
and as long as he keeps his mouth shut, which I'm sure he will.
He'll never say a word.
Yeah. So no, he'll spend the rest of his life in isolation now.
Yep.
Which is what Bulger was doing until he was conveniently moved to a more volatile prison, probably.
And here's the thing, too. He's 89. Why'd you move him? I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
He doesn't have much longer to go.
That is a good question. Were they moving him because he was, you know, his trial was going on in another area? Was it something like that kind of move?
And that doesn't say at all. And anything because I think everything he's had has been done for a long time.
I thought so too. But
Yeah. But that also, who knows? And again, they do move prisoners from federal prison to federal prison.
Yeah.
So it could just be, it also could have been he was 89 and they maybe were trying to move him closer to Boston.
Maybe.
You know?
Or it could have been, he's 89. This is our last chance to get him before God gets him.
Right.
So, and
by the way, I don't think I said this, did I? He cut his tongue out.
Holy shit! No, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, no, he cut his tongue out.
Wow.
So that is the ultimate sign of
the
rat killer. So.
Yeah. Wow. Well, goodbye, James Whitey Bulger.
Right, Whitey, you'll live on in movies and TV forever now, I'm sure.
Yeah, the infamous bad guy of our time period. You know, which is he's not somebody you can get behind. You know, a Dillinger you could get behind. You know, it's even though Dillinger had murdered people, he was a much more charismatic type of person. The law enforcement back during that time period, more than half of it was corrupt anyway, and so you had, you know, we were going through the Depression.
Right.
I had heard that I'm sure you have too, that they didn't really kill him, that was somebody else's body because of the surgery.
I've read more things that make me believe that he didn't die then.
Yeah.
That they actually killed him. Then he actually was killed then.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Our friend David, he's definitely convinced of that.
I believe it. Because, I've read enough stuff about that and enough books and articles that it's like, okay, I can believe that. It's just like, for me, it just would be like Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
Billy the Kid was, even though he was an outlaw, he was a hero. He was a modern day 1800s Robin Hood.
You're right. There were a lot of.
I still feel like Billy the Kid was one of them ones that, lived until like 1930 or something like that.
That's the supposed story is that the old man with the pack mule walks out of the desert, like in the Young Guns movie, and has a story to tell. I'm the real Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
And I think why people are still, you know, like my friend here is saying, is that he was, although he was hunted down like an outlaw, the fight that made him an outlaw, you know, there were two sides to this thing. You know, you had an English guy,
right,
you know, showing up in an area where there was already predominantly Irish-controlled territory. Mm-hmm. And this is in America, in the New World.
Right.
And to put a little history on that is that the English were the ones who controlled the Irish back in Ireland. In fact, you know, during the potato famine, you know, it's the English who lived, you know, basically untouched while everybody, you know, all the peasants starved to death. So there's a lot of hatred between the two, especially, you know, from the Irish towards the Englishmen. And this Englishman was a friend of Billy the Kid's, and this Irish family, you know, who saw this Englishman as a threat, they murdered him flat out. They shot his horse too. They were so, you know, that's how much they hated him.
And that used to be the ultimate, like, almost insult in the Old West was to kill a man's horse.
Yeah.
Even if he was dead, you would still kill his horse.
Yeah. So that's how much they hated him, and that's why Billy the Kid, though, ended up fighting that family.
Yeah.
And I think another interesting, the story I'd heard that I loved was the fact that he learned to speak Spanish pretty quickly.
Very young, yeah.
Now this is a kid from, like, you know, I guess the Bowery or whatever, you know, the slums of the East Coast.
Right.
You know, who's made his way across the country with his mother, you know, single mother, here we go, and Irish, very young teenager type thing.
Right.
And he gets out here to, is it New Mexico?
Yes.
Yeah, and
it was either New Mexico or Arizona. I don't know.
He embraces the culture, especially the Mexican part of the culture. You know, the beautiful Mexican women, the food, the music. He loves it. So here's an Irish kid in New Mexico.
An Irish kid with all these beautiful Mexican women.
Yeah, he was in heaven. He was having a great time and trying to make a living as a ranch hand.
Right.
And got pulled into an ugly war, and there were a lot of these type of killings besides like the Hatfield and the McCoy is the classic example, but that was a feud thing that made Billy the Kid an outlaw. He wasn't like these guys that were running around hitting banks like the fucking James gang. Those were straight up killers.
Yeah, those were just
murderers.
Yeah.
Like Cole Younger and all that. That's
Julio.
the difference.
That's Julio, our co-host, by the way.
Yeah, he's our conspiracy dog.
Yeah.
He smells a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. This is off the topic, I guess. Well, it's everything's on topic here at Cities of Blood, but
we're talking about a city or a town or whatever.
We just had a friend over here earlier who was telling us about Scott Peterson and an alternate theory.
Ooh, I don't think we should talk about that yet.
No, you don't say that one?
I think that's a whole podcast.
Oh, yeah.
But wait, stay tuned.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I had not heard this alternate theory, but we'll get back on point. So,
but I think it's and you go to the Old West. I mean, and we've talked about this in prior conversations. Is there was no law.
No.
There might have been a badge somewhere, but you could go from, and I'll use Sacramento as the example. You could go to Sacramento, and they'd say no guns in town.
Yeah.
Or no, leave your guns at the bar.
Yeah.
You can go to Placerville, which is a 2 days ride at that point.
Yeah.
In 1875, let's just say, and you could walk around town with everything. So, but you're still ran by the same, basically, marshal, sheriff.
The Wild West had a lot of murderers, and
that's the reason why it was called the Wild West, because there was no law.
It was lawless.
Yeah.
No doubt, and that's
a lawless land ran by lawless men.
In a racist time period, in a sexist time period, it's yeah.
And I also think, too, is that, to kind of take things back to our beginning with the Whitey Bulger stuff, go to a prison in 1880.
Yeah.
There was no guards. There was guards on the perimeter. Yeah. It was a yard.
I'd heard
with tents.
That was around the time when they were building Folsom Prison, right?
Probably, yeah. Folsom Prison. Yeah. The original Folsom Prison is really old.
It was the cells. It was like dungeons type things. And
even before. But that's the thing, though. Before then, old prisons were basically concentration camps.
Well, and that goes to, I guess the point I was trying to make with the old prison is that the old prison, from what I had heard, they were isolation chambers, and that wasn't so much of a torture thing. It was more of a monastical type thing. You were supposed to, contemplate your crimes, almost in a religious type experience, and therefore change, recuperate. What do they call that when they're trying to? My vocabulary is failing me right now. But when they try to cure you or fix you of the crime that you committed, of being a thief or a murderer or whatever, but that your time in isolation was penitence. There wasn't, at least initially, I don't think there was a general population type thing. And I think once you end up with this general population, and which is a big part of the problem now, most prisoners will say they love general population because it's freedom, and if you get in isolation, it's not freedom. You have no interaction with other people. But I thought the whole idea of prison was to take away freedom.
Right.
So, to me, I'd say get rid of the general population altogether. It's a hell of a lot safer for every prisoner.
Put them all in one-person cells.
One or two tops. And pair them up properly. Don't put a 89-year-old guy with a hip transplant in the cell with the guy who just killed the last informant.
Right.
How does that happen? How do they even end up in the same part of the prison?
It doesn't make sense. And to go back to the Old West, Phil, you're convicted of horse robbery. You're going to do 30 days in prison. I mean, let's just say 30 days. I don't know.
Light.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe, 90. You literally take your tent and probably your horse.
Yeah.
And they put you behind four walls, and they just make sure you don't escape. Probably a bag of food, and your wife or your girlfriend or your buddies could throw food over the fence to you.
Well, people got to remember this is a young country. In retrospect, that time period in England, they were still using dungeons.
Right. And I think, too, when you think about the United States as a whole, I mean, and I'm talking about when basically the white man got here.
Yeah.
What are we talking? 400 years, 1,500 years, or 400 or 500 years.
We've got about 500 years of since the Spanish landed.
Right. Okay. Close enough to being white.
Yeah.
You know. So it's like. Then you go to places like China or Japan that are centuries and centuries and centuries old. Now, granted, there were Native Americans here long before the white man, but we don't know about it because we weren't here.
Well, and they destroyed
they destroyed all the history.
They destroyed the history that was already here. One of the biggest crimes of the last 500 years is the fact that in order to go and see a working pyramid, and by working I mean people were using the things. They built them for a reason, even though we don't know really what they were. So, in order to find one in Egypt, you have to go back several thousand years,
right.
Where you can actually see what it did look like, because we're looking at ruins right now. But with Mexico, the Great Pyramid, I mean, you could go 500 years ago, you could have seen, them using it, sacrificing people off the top. And imagine a whole city. I heard Mexico City was surrounded by a lake with these pyramids in the middle and everything. It must have been gorgeous.
I still think, kind of off topic, but Mexico City from the air is still one of the prettiest cities I've ever seen.
All right, about to wrap up another episode. This is a shorter episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. It was on James Whitey Bulger for the most part. And please join us again next time. Click on the links and do what you got to do. Give us a thumbs up if you like it.
Cities of Blood on Facebook. Give us the old doop. And then @Cities Blood on Twitter.
And don't forget to subscribe.
I'm Alexis Darevko.
And I'm Phil DeSaro.
Thanks for watching.
See you next time.